Spider-Man comics today absolutely break me to my core, physically and mentally. It's just in my eyes, I don't see at all anymore where Peter's story is even going at this point whatsoever. MJ now has two kids and dates some guy named fucking Mark, I think. Peter gets his ass handed to him in every issue I've seen so far, and is going nowhere in life for like the 50th time in a row. And to top it all off, Peter Parker is now working for Norman Osborn, the same man that literally killed Gwen Stacy and blew her back out and gave her two kids behind Peter's back. And I find that while reading these stories and finding that Spider-Man is now riding a glider and acts like a teenage boy trying to ask out his crush for Black Cat, that I kind of just miss the simpler times where the Spider-Man comics had a charm to them and a direction, where an issue would just be about Spider-Man maybe patrolling New York and just eating Chinese food on a rooftop. And then after cracking open a fortune cookie and reading his fortune, out of pure luck he'd find a subway card allowing him to get home free and without getting wet. Then upon taking the subway, maybe a freak accident would occur, and he would have to save tons of people, and then he would end up just fighting the next bad guy of the week, and maybe by the end he would meet his aunt's new boyfriend. Just kind of always taking you down this always exciting life that Peter Parker has. In this era of Spider-Man comics, I have a ton of favorite stories, but personally for me, none can top this story I'm about to share with you. It's a story that essentially covers Spider-Man's no-kill rule in the best way imaginable, while also tackling Peter Parker's survivor's guilt, along with J. Jonah Jameson's survivor guilt as well. So providing context to the story, while Spider-Man is trying to defeat his villain, Alistair Smythe, aka the Spider Slayer, Spider-Man has trouble stopping his foe, and in the process, Smythe tries to kill JJ and his wife. But before Smythe can kill J. Jonah Jameson, his wife leaps in the way of Smythe's blades, and in the process gets fatally wounded, and JJ has to slowly watch as another love of his life dies before him by an insane maniac. After this happens, J. Jonah Jameson ends up blaming himself for her death, as he sees that he put her in that position to die in the first place. After this, the events preceding show no dialogue, but you can feel the silence within each panel, seeing JJ waking from the bed he once shared with his wife, now with just a void. And as we go further, the panels express just how lonely he is now, as we see things once used by his wife now frozen in time. And you can just feel the sadness dripping from these pages. You feel JJ's loss. We then switch over to Peter's daily routine, doing his morning shave, putting on the costume, and getting ready. But while buttoning his clothes, he cringes with guilt and throws away the suit, seeing it as a reminder of his failure. Later on, leaving to join every one of JJ's loved ones to arrive at the funeral. And upon further panels, we see Peter's guilt emerge further when JJ enters the cathedral, displaying a white barrier separating Peter from the ones he cares about, feeling immense shame just being in the vicinity of JJ and his loved ones. As the panels quickly go from the cathedral to the burial, and once the process is complete, there's another perfectly drawn panel of Jameson facing away from Peter, as Peter almost looks as if he wants to say something. Anything. But then the moment passes and it's 2 a.m. and Peter finally closes his eyes to go to bed, only for the next page to flourish into a spiral of the one night Peter's life changed forever, like a fever dream of guilt as Peter tries again to save Uncle Ben, but can't. After this happens, Peter's then thrusted into a kitchen looking over his parents' shoulders, and Peter running to them in excitement, their faces are blank as his parents say nasty things to Peter such as "it's been too long, he doesn't remember our faces," and that Peter thinks of Uncle Ben and Aunt May as his true parents. Then in a flash, Peter sees Uncle Ben's killer and Uncle Ben getting ready to go to the afterlife together, while Peter absolutely can't comprehend what's happening, going even further to show that Aunt May will join them as well soon. But upon Peter taking her hand, she turns into JJ's wife, saying that if she were Aunt May, Peter would have saved her. However, as Peter tries to beg for forgiveness, he's launched into an amalgam of memories of everyone he's lost in the never-ending crusade of being Spider-Man, until he runs into the very woman he actually killed so long ago. To make a long story short, this woman's name is Charlie, and on an adventure with Wolverine, events transpired that would culminate in Spider-Man throwing a punch meant for Wolverine, but instead Charlie received it, and Peter not holding back thinking it was Wolverine, it would end up killing her instantly. After this happened, it was a huge event for Peter because he had actually killed somebody for the first time, and accident or not, it changed him. So reminded of Charlie, Peter falls to his knees in guilt and exclaims that he's tried so hard to forget, and he's tried to reason with himself about his actions that day, saying to himself that it was an accident he took her life, saying that he never meant to kill her and that's not who he is. But as soon as he says this, he's interrupted interrupted by the Green Goblin stating that what he's saying isn't true at all, as Goblin says for Peter to be honest with himself, that he's got and always has had the mind of a killer, even as Peter begins to wrap his hands around the Goblin's throat to kill him. But it's soon interrupted by Gwen as she asks Peter if he could really do it this time, and if Peter loves her enough to kill him. But then Peter says that he really wanted to, and that he planned to kill the Goblin. But Green Goblin interrupts him anyway to say that he was never going to kill him in the first place, and that's what costed him not only his life, but Gwen Stacy's life as well, as they both fall from the bridge, transitioning into a nightmarish graveyard of villains that have died and come back over and over again trying to kill Spider-Man, until they all end up shot dead as Peter finds himself in a diner full of heroes like the Punisher, Wolverine, and Scourge, killing villains and heroes like Stiltman and the Hornet, telling Spidey that essentially to be a real hero means you have to be willing to kill. As the nightmare switches over to a TV broadcast of the Sentry killing Carnage, ripping him in two, while Sentry proceeds to give Peter shit essentially about why he even kept a man like Carnage alive for so long, saying to Peter that killing is justified so long as it preserves life. As the vision of Sentry gets darker and darker till the Sentry becomes the Void, exclaiming to Peter that he honestly wouldn't have it any other way. And all of these different scenarios that Peter's gone through end up culminating to Peter flashing back to watching Uncle Ben's killer getting away. But this time, after everything he's seen in his dream, Peter grabs him by his throat and proceeds to punch him over and over till he's nothing but a bloody mess on the floor, seeing that if he kills this man, he'll save the lives of others. But in getting up from beating the man to an inch of his life, he looks to see Uncle Ben has taken his place, telling him that this is how he'd kill his memory of him, how he'd be responsible for the death of everything he's given to Peter, the death of his love, his pride, and his memory if he ever killed. Peter then shakingly tries to say to Uncle Ben that it would never come to that, but then the dream asks, if that's so, what will you do now? After this, Peter wakes up shaking from the most trauma-induced dream of his life and looks at the Spider-Man suit knowing what he has to do next, proceeding to put on the suit, exclaiming that he's done accepting things the way they are, swearing to all of New York that from now on, whenever Spider-Man is around, no one else dies, making the most impossible promise ever, but you can't help but feel such hope from such a noble ideal, only for the next panel to literally show somebody getting shot. Now, to follow up with why I love this comic in particular, it's mostly due to the following issue, involving the villain Massacre, who was literally created to question the idea of Spider-Man's no-kill rule and why it's so important. Massacre is essentially a villain who was once an ordinary man that valued his life, his career, and his wife, but after a fatal car bombing, he would end up with a metal shard in his head and his wife dead from the explosion. The metal shard would end up severing most brain functions like empathy for human life and would cause Massacre to almost be completely dead inside. In this happening, he would start killing large masses of people, hence his name, to try and feel any sort of human emotion at all, like happiness, sadness, anxiety, depression, anger, literally anything. And we see this play out as he starts to blow up a building full of hostages. Spider-Man and the police would try to stop Massacre, but Massacre would escape to do this frightening act of terror once again. After this happens, days later, JJ holds a press conference with the victims of the bombing, and JJ sees in a child's eyes who lost their mother the same grief as himself in losing his wife, and promises the kid that Massacre will die. So he declares to New York that no matter what, Massacre will be shot on sight. This is also pretty important to the character of J. Jonah Jameson because in his eyes, he sees Massacre as Alistair Smythe, the same man that killed his wife. So after this press conference, this causes all of New York to also want him dead, and Peter tries to stand against this as it goes against everything he's just promised. Because in Peter's eyes, there will always be a hope that even someone like Massacre can be healed and given the chance for redemption. Peter's stance gets backed up even further when he finds a report of Massacre's ailment and finds out that if treated, Massacre can be the same man he once was again with time. So as the story continues, the police corner Massacre along with Spidey, and while Spidey saves the day and stops Massacre, there's a brief moment where the police have Massacre in their line of fire, and JJ gives the order without a second thought to kill him. But in the very last second, with Peter's new Spidey suit, he saves Massacre from the rain of bullets and says aloud, "No one else dies. Not even Massacre." And to me, there's just something so pure about this. Later, upon turning Massacre in, JJ rips into Spider-Man about being an idiot for sparing Massacre's life, but Peter says that JJ can't play God with people's lives, even the likes of Massacre, and that the people of New York need to be better, otherwise they are just like the people they fight against. JJ then says that even if Massacre goes behind bars, there's always the possibility that he could break out again, to which Spider-Man says that if he breaks out again, he'll be there to stop him, telling JJ that he's Spider-Man, and when he he's around, no one else dies. And JJ hearing this, he pauses for a second, and he literally says to Spider-Man that he's a fucking idiot, as Spider-Man just swings off. And to end the story, later landing on top of a building, Peter swears again that he can do the impossible because he has great power, and as Spider-Man, he can make it work, promising the people of New York that everything he does moving forward will be for them, ending the story. Now, I love this story for so many reasons, but most of all I love it for its caliber of writing and the way it sends Peter down a rabbit hole of guilt where he ultimately comes out of it all a better man and sets out to accomplish such a noble and almost impossible cause, while also showing the other side of Peter's actions through JJ's turmoil and how he grieves over his wife, and how JJ ultimately targets his vengeance through an entirely different person, showing perfectly the duality between how two people handle in their own ways a set of problems like survivor's guilt and so on. And while reading, you really feel that there is a point to all of it. Unlike how it is now, where fucking Green Goblin is the Gold Goblin. And oh look, he's got a list of people he's wronged, like the baby. But anyways, I guess my point in this video today was just to basically say that I wish Spider-Man comics today were like the Spider-Man comics of the past, because most of the older stories are such a blast to read. But moving forward, I also wanted to say that I have another video I'll be working on about specifically JJ and Spidey's dynamic in the near future, so look for that. And I hope you guys like the story, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And I'll catch y'all on the flip side.